Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you may be listening to us from here on this big, beautiful planet we call Earth. This is Michael Cross here with another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions. Now, what I'd like to discuss is the idea that some people actually envision as a perfect ideal society. And that is one that would be patterned over an anthill or something similar to a beehive. Now, usually when we think of anthills, it's a little negative because, to be honest, ants are a little bit cringy, aren't they? They're a little bit spooky. We go out and have a picnic. They try to steal our food, bite us if they're like those stupid red ants that are so common where I live, and so forth. Whereas bees we think of as being nice, sweet creatures that, they sting us once in a while if we accidentally sit on them or step on them. But for the most part, they're pretty friendly, and they make honey for us. So we see that as wonderful. In fact, I think, is it Manchester, England, that the bee is like a city symbol? I just saw some article that a lot of people were getting bees tattooed after the terrorist attack that occurred there. But ultimately, bees and ants have one thing in common, and that is the structure of their society. And through it, you have the queen, and there's a small select, I'm not going to go into a biology lesson, okay, I don't want to bore you there, but there's a small select number of sometimes potential, but at least males and females that could take over, but the reproduction is carried out by the queen. And almost all of the remaining creatures that exist in either the hive or the anthill are working to, preserve the communal balance and homeostasis, and also just gather food and protect the hill or the hive from any and all intruders. That's why, for instance, if you're out having a picnic, they might bite you. They see you as a threat. But ultimately, there are people that think this would be a really good way to set up human society. And I deal with this in my, I have a book published. You can look it up if you're into like a science fiction book set in the era of Noah. It's called The Destiny of Our Past. Okay, it's just simple, The Destiny of Our Past. If you're in like Scandinavia, you can look up Libris, or if you're in America, you can look up on Amazon, or UK, or I guess anywhere on Amazon. But ultimately, it is a society that is set up along these lines, in which you have an upper elite, they were a group that became elite because of eugenics, and the idea is that they control the society and ultimately use biotechnology as a means to maintain that control, but ultimately their end goal is to eliminate the commoner class, since they don't need them anymore. And then I'm also working on a book. I don't have a title. I've got some ideas, though, in which it's set actually in the very near future, dealing with microchip technology. And the idea would be that you could microchip people, but ultimately this microchip would take over who they are. And there you have something that is that is a possibility for actually existing. When we think of, a lot of times when we hear about this new technology coming, we think of interfaces in which a person will be able to derive benefits from the machine if you could in some way connect to the machine. But interfaces work both ways. What if the machine is connecting to you? All right? You don't know what could actually be downloaded. Now, the thing is, I will say the human brain does not work the same way as a binary computer. some people have a false notion that it does. And there are some similarities, but there's also a lot of differences. But if you could get it to where you could send in impulses and be able to, well, even read a human's mind, and then be able to tailor the impulses coming from the computer to what that person already believes or feels or whatever, then you would have a device that could ultimately be the ultimate dystopian nightmare. Now, without going into more of the science fiction aspects, even though ultimately, you think about the stuff that you read about. I mean, I heard, I'm not going to go into detail. I saw a debate taking place on on the Facebook forums I belong to. And there were fans of radio show host Alex Jones and also Glenn Beck, and they were having it out. And one of the things that was thrown at Jones was that he believes that there's like chimeras, that's human-animal hybrids, being produced, and that artificial intelligence might someday take over the Earth. And some of the people that were against him were saying, this is so stupid, this is so silly. But hey, come on, okay? I have an interest in this stuff, alright? I have looked into it. I have explored it. I mean, you don't just sit down and write a book without any knowledge. And yet, I see people making comments that they have no idea what's going on out there. It doesn't take much research to see that there's some pretty interesting, some would say scary, experiments being done in which human DNA and animal DNA are mixed. All right? I mean, it is taking place. And most of it's to do research. Some of it's to, learn how the brain works. Some of it's to perhaps someday be able to use animal-grown organs for transplants and so forth. But it is taking place. A lot of it. And, for people to be thinking, oh, this is so silly to talk about this, look it up for yourselves. And also the thing about artificial intelligence, I mean, you can practically pick up, you can pick up mainstream publications, and there's more than just a little bit of scientists and so forth saying that the future, we have a greater chance of being wiped out by robots that we create than disease or asteroids or nuclear wars. And so I think people really need to know what's going on. It doesn't mean you have to support or like or dislike or whatever any particular personalities out there. But to just, say that it's crazy or conspiratorial or whatever to talk about certain subjects is just showing us a level of ignorance that is phenomenal. All right? I mean, look this stuff up. It's going on. Now, the thing I want to concentrate on mostly, though, is this whole idea of, could you turn human society into something very similar to an anthill or a beehive? And I think the answer to that is yes. Now, I know there's some philosophers out there who think it already is. Okay, and you could do some reverse anthropomorphism and be able to make connections. But the technology we have the technology we have being developed is something that could really make this a reality. Now, I was looking at something the other day that was talking about microchips. And, of course, now since I'm almost done with a book dealing with microchip technology, I start seeing all of this stuff come up. But there was an article talking about a company, a passenger-style company in Sweden. And it was, looking into the idea that you could get a microchip in which every time you use the services of this company to travel, then all you would have to do is hold your hand up. You take the monitor or whatever you're using to register it, and just, put it to the hand, beep, and you're shown that you have a ticket without having to worry about losing your wallet, losing your ticket, or something like that. Now, I've talked about microchipping in the past, and I have said you can make a good argument for it. I mean, in theory, you could have a microchip, walk into a store stark naked, and be able to do shopping, and then just walk right out, and the microchip will be registered, and whatever you bought will then be tabulated and taken out of your bank account. And, there's the idea that you wouldn't have to carry a wallet around when it comes to identification and all of this kind of stuff. And I guess unless someone cuts your hand off, which, that's the first thing that came to my mind, that would be, if you want to rob someone, just get the old hacksaw out and, then you could do it. But, you could argue that this would be very convenient. However, think about the cost. In my book, I better mention it, Destiny of Our Past. Anyway, in my book, the people are microchipped. Now, I don't deal much with microchipping. I never actually make it look like something that is the major part of the plot, because it's not. But there is a scene where one of the head people, a corporate leader, his name's Enlil, and if you're familiar with Sumerian gods, yes, I do present the premise that the Sumerian gods were not aliens, but, as you see a lot on conspiracy stuff, they weren't aliens, but they were actually humans who were very powerful, who happened to survive the flood. And that the stories you see, like in the all these epics that came out of Sumeria, just confuse the timeline and so forth when it comes to Gilgamesh and the flood that destroyed the world and that sort of thing. But there's a scene in which Enlil is noting that the two main characters were together with each other, and he knew this because he had been tracking their microchips. And that's something you got to think about. If you have an advanced microchip that has some sort of GPS, and yes, they will be small enough to use. I mean, they use them on pets now when you lose your dog or whatever. And the idea would be that you would know where this person was. Now, of course, parents might be going, and I've seen this on news shows in America, parents might go, that would be great. I would know where my son or daughter was if they'd been abducted or something like that. However, well, first of all, I would note that if someone's really kidnapping your kid to do harm to them, or kidnapping an individual to do harm to them, it only takes a pocket knife and, they're going to be able to disable that little device real quick. It's not going to be it's not going to feel very good for the person that has a chip in their skin, but it's not going to be difficult to remove a chip, okay? Anyone with a pocket knife could do it. Now, the danger, though, is think about that. You would know when people are together. You would know when people are meeting. Now, it could be anything. A person could know when, you notice your chip, well, not your chip, but the chip of your husband or wife seems to be spending a lot of time with the chip of someone else. Well, the state could have this technology. Individuals might be able to get their hands on this technology, and pretty soon we know the whereabouts of anyone, anywhere, anytime. Do we really want that? Do we really want the state knowing where we're at all the time? Talk about what Edward Snowden warned about, saying that we were at risk of no privacy. I think Assange has also said this. Our privacy is just disappearing. You put chips in people, you might as well just, I was going to say just get a dog collar on. You don't need a dog collar. You got the chip. All right? In one of my other books, Descent into Darkness, the idea was also that the main character was trying to bring down this sex trafficking organization. And the problem is that in order to infiltrate it, you were going to have to be microchipped. And if you're microchipped, then that's going to really cut back on your ability to get around and do so in privacy. So, in other words, the danger would be that the heads of this organization would know if you were for some reason going into the police or something like that. So, that's the right book, Freedom from Conscience, Descent into Darkness. Now, the thing is, this would be a reality. This would be something I don't know if we really want to have. That the government, maybe corporations, maybe individuals could find out where you were at any given time. I find that very, very frightening, to be honest. Just, because sometimes you just like to be alone and somewhere where no one knows you're there and, out in nature and just enjoy yourself. Well, that would be the end of that. And think of it, if the government wanted to get rid of you, they could call in a drone strike, and there's no hiding because, well, no matter where you go, they'll find you. So I'd be very wary of the microchip. And also the idea is that what if we do go cashless and we have no money anymore and it's all through our bank accounts that are through the microchip? Well, you just shut it off. You're looking for someone, you know where they're at, but you can also make sure that they have no way of purchasing anything to get away from you, for instance. They can't buy a plane ticket or a train ticket or something like that. Yeah, you've got them. You've got them under your control. And, there's been a lot of recent films that have actually shown people, getting microchipped. But it's been in a positive way for some reason. At least one of the ones I saw recently, it saved their life because when they were in trouble, someone could come in there and rescue them. I'm just wondering, was that put in there just as a good plot device, or was there another reason? Okay, was there another reason? Now don't start thinking that the books I present are in some way a way to get people used to the idea. But I'm just wondering how many things in our Hollywood movies are actually just creativity of the writer, and which ones are suggestions from the government. We've done shows on this before. The government does have a great deal of influence on the kinds of entertainment we see. So, and I mean that directly, using their influence to say, hey, we give you this if you change your plot. Anyway, another thing that I was looking at, which was pretty scary, was there's tech firms that are working on telepathy. The idea would be that if there's several different ways this could be done, but let's just say it was through a microchip. Get a little microchip in your forehead, and the other person has a microchip in theirs, and then you could connect in such a way that you'd be able to read each other's minds. Now, I would personally find that very disturbing because you can be with someone you love very much, and 10 minutes later you want to kill them, and then 10 minutes later you want to have sex with them, all this kind of stuff, and people be able to read each other's minds. Could make, my gosh, if this was something that was shared, this could make night clubbing obsolete. I mean, who wants to buy a drink or something like that? Someone walks in, they notice that there's 3 potential guys that all want to have sex, and then, you could figure out which one was either the one-night stand that maybe you were looking for, or the, hey, I'd like to get to know someone and maybe form a relationship. Well, you would know that right off. So who would waste money on buying drinks? So the nightclubs would close down, I suppose. Could make meeting people at bus stops rather inconvenient too. But this idea of a telepathy, if you think about that, wouldn't that kind of kill individuality in that sense? Wouldn't we then have something similar to Star Trek, where you had the Borg, and they're all interconnected with one another? Now there's an anthill for you. In how Star Trek presented that species of humans that are they are assimilated, they are connected. If there's any threat, they can react to it. If there is no threat, they're just docile. It's like they don't have any individual mind of their own. And I've talked to a lot of people that actually think that would be a wonderful thing. It would be somewhat of a spiritual transcendence to nirvana or something. I think that this nirvana idea would have the at least the foundational thought that there'd be gods or God who would be benevolent and wonderful and so forth, that would lead people to this paradise, so to speak. But I don't think that that's the way human society would operate. I think that do you really want a group of psychopaths in charge of your mind? And what they do with it? But if you had this kind of telepathy, that would be the ultimate beehive or anthill. Because then you could be programmed to do this or that. You'd be very efficient. Efficient use of resources. You could get rid of unhealthy behaviors. But you'd also get rid of the humanity that makes people people. And I think there was a character in the Bible that wanted to do that, isn't there? And we see they're not presented as the good guy. Okay, so, but this technology, if it could be produced, would be, again, fantastic. But I think it could be very dangerous too. And also, again, we get back into this interface idea where we think that we could connect to the computers and we will be more efficient. Think of an airplane pilot whose reflexes could be through a computer system. But the problem with that, again, where's the door? Where's the how do you shut the door to make sure that nothing comes in and stays there? Well, that's the big question, isn't it? And then if someone assured you that that was all safeguarded, how the heck could you believe them? Would you believe a marketer? All right, would you believe a government? A marketer, my gosh, if they could find out what your wants and desires are down to the minute detail, that would be the most enviable position ever, because you could sell anyone anything. So think about that for a moment. Now, there's another thing that I'm thinking is, in the anthill philosophy, is we got a lot of people really promoting this whole thing with the basic income. I think Finland's experimenting with it. Now, you do a basic income, and I understand the rationale that we're going to continue losing jobs. Robots are taking over more and more occupations, And eventually it could come that AI will be so advanced that robots can take over everything. Now, the problem would be, then what do you do with people? Now, I've heard one transhumanist guy running for office somewhere where he said that let's divide up a lot of the public land and let people have their own plots of land, and they could kind of be self-sustaining and so forth. And if you had some sort of basic income, this could be a pretty neat thing. I don't think the environmentalists will ever let you do that, but it's an interesting prospect. I think this, though. I think what's going to happen is this. And, if you don't believe me, please, I always say this to people when I bring up some of this weird stuff, is look up Global Trends 2030 and look up UN Agenda 2030 as well. Okay? The first one I mentioned, the Global Trends 2030, is something that was created by the intelligence agencies in the United States to predict where the world was going. And this was based on what's going on now, what that's leading to, and what it will lead to in just a little over a decade. And the other one, the UN Agenda 2030, often it's listed as sustainable development. This is quite interesting because if you compare it to what the intelligence agencies are saying, we see a certain overlap. And that is such things as, what could become smart cities, where we develop urban housing for people in which you have a small apartment, very functional, very environmental. We won't need a lot of private cars because people can get around with public transportation. Work will be in the cities along with where you live. It's kind of like back in the, maybe 1920 when, you live before, well, let's just go back a little bit further. Let's say 1910, before most people had cars. And so if you got a job at a steel mill in Pittsburgh, you tried to get a home nearby because it was, you didn't have a car to go and drive to the steel mill and park and then go to work. So you lived where you worked, essentially. And this could be a return to that, where we have a lot of tech-type businesses that will be located in urban areas, and people will live nearby, so they don't have to drive. Now, if we put this together for a moment, now think about this. Small units of housing, all right? At least this is what I've been able to see through people's analysis of this, that it would be small, affordable units of housing, whether you had a job or you're getting a basic income, but then you also have to put in a certain amount of work. It'll depend. But do you really think that this kind of scenario will lead to human independence? I think it'd be quite the contrary. You give people just enough money to survive. You regulate what they're using in regards to resources. You basically are creating this anthill mentality in which it'll be, it almost sounds Marxist, from each according to their ability to each according to their need. It won't be Marxist in the sense of like this shared ownership of the means of production. That will be through mega corporations who will have the resources to be churning out the workers of the future, and that will be the robots, and researching more efficient, more intelligent, more versatile robots that will do all this work. And I think what's going to lead to is people, maybe plugging in and turning off. Just plug into your artificial virtual reality units, and maybe connect to other people via your telepathy, and live in very much like a Matrix sort of world. Except it could be one made to your liking and to the people in whatever group you're in. Now think about this when it comes to reproduction and so forth. Will people in this fast-paced, everything now type environment really be suited for wanting to marry and have kids? I think not. I think what will happen is, and I've mentioned this in shows in the past, you're going to have polyamory. It'll be mostly females who will form family units. They will get donations, or there may be one or more males within this unit. There's a new thing called omnigamy, where it's not so much 5 people living in the same household, or 5 people who say we are a couple, but it's where maybe Joe is friends with Susan, and that's allowed. Susan is in a relationship with Janet, who is also in a relationship with Charles, and Thomas, who's also involved with Roger, but it would all be like a flow chart. And this, I think, in a society where people no longer really have to exert effort when it comes to work, where they have their own little, I guess, dorm room type of, it's bigger than a dorm room, but existence, and you have all these other toys at your disposal, then most men will just opt just to be there. And, have this like self-indulgent lifestyle. Whereas women and some men will form these omnigamy type of relationships, or at least polyamory sort of relationships. And reproduction could either be through selecting the best and the brightest donors, or through people's individual choices, saying, well, we really like Roger over here, let's all use him for our baby making. And again, this will evolve, though, into, when we start getting into designer children with biotechnology, this will evolve into maybe regulations, and which will say this is how we have to raise our, the children that are raised in this new society. And this will give much more power to the ones who hold the power in the first place, and that would be government and the large corporations. And so, I guess you could be an outlier. You can go out into the wilderness, maybe you live in Australia, go out in the outback, or you live in America and, go to Montana or someplace, and you could still survive. But the allure of this easy living in an urban area, if you just give up a lot of your autonomy, would be incredible. Plus, in all likelihood, the laws would be, they might try to set laws up to try to make it where it would be very expensive to live on your own, without being plugged into the matrix. So, we have this going on. And so I think we may see more and more of this technocratic control that B.F. Skinner actually envisioned, where you have scientists and planners who are in the background, who are setting up all of the aspects of society. And yet people will just eventually not even care. Because it's not so much that it will be authoritarian in the sense that, like 1984, oppressive, mean, cruel, but it will be authoritarian. No, not even authoritarian. It'll be totalitarian. Authoritarian just means do something, I swat you for it. Totalitarian means think something, and I'll swat you for it. And in this way, we might be able to modify people's thoughts. we might be able to at least know who's thinking the things that need to be addressed. And in that sense, when you get rid of autonomy to that degree, you are talking about an anthill existence that could eventually lead to this idea of, you're not going to just have one person churning out the babies, but you are going to perhaps have just a few people who will be responsible for keeping the population continuing, but it will be a population that will drastically decline once this is set up in all the cities. Okay? Because only a small number of people will still be traditional. And the allure to this will transcend religion. It'll transcend philosophy. You can see how that works today in the world. There's many people that live in very, very conservative countries, but yet in private, they live their life, they might drink alcohol when they're not supposed to, but they do it very privately. The thing is that this society will be one in which you won't have that kind of be able to sneak around so much ability. You'll become more complacent, compliant in order to fit in, because humans do like to fit in to the environments they live. And usually they will start rationalizing whatever they may have to give up in order to live comfortably. So I think ultimately we could wind up where maybe 90% of the people on Earth will be living this anthill existence. And with the technology we have, it'll make it so much easier to do. There will be those who will be stubborn, and probably some of the people listening to this show right now, who will not choose to integrate within this new framework. But, it's going to come down to perhaps they will be seen in the same way we look at, and sometimes people mock the Amish because they don't like to use technology. And, that will be something that we'll have to, people would have to deal with if they choose to be outliers. But maybe their lives will be more authentic than the people who are like, okay, hook me into the system. And once you're in the system, well, maybe there is no getting out. And by the way, how would you know that you could think, okay, I'll change my mind? It's part of the new book I'm writing, in which the main character, when they do get microchipped, they start, at first they're like, there's no way, I am too independent, I will beat this thing. But yet they can't. They think they're making the decision to be independent. But what they're doing is each decision they make is one in which they give up more and more of their freedom. Although they think that they're doing it on their own. So anyway, when you hear people making fun of people for making statements about biotechnology, about robotics and artificial intelligence and microchipping and all the areas that surround futurology, then look it up for yourself. Okay? Don't take anyone's word for it. Look it up for yourself and see what's really going on out there. Because, it's not like in one place. It might be a newspaper over here that deals with one experiment or program or application, and then there's one over here that deals with another one, and one over here that deals with another one. But if you stay abreast of these things, you'll find that it's a world that is far different than what most people believe. Because most people believe within the paradigm of what they were raised in. Oh, it's a little different. I got an iPhone now. But they don't understand what's going on and what's going to be going on.
What